Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Hubert. So today's video will be another remake of a previous older video that was a part of Outlast week back in 2020, in which I discussed the differences between Mount Massive Asylum and Buffalo State Asylum for the Insane, later Buffalo State Hospital, which is currently known as the Buffalo Psychriatic Center, now part of the Richardson Olmsted Complex or Campus. Due to the popularity and the overwhelming success of that video, I do not have plans to take it down, at least for the foreseeable future. However, just like my video on the secondary vocational block, it is nevertheless dated and is something I would consider substandard, especially when compared to some of my current content. I also hope that it will make a good sort of companion video to the older one. Anyways, here we go. This is the updated comparison between Mount Massive Asylum and Buffalo State Hospital. I hope you guys enjoy this remake, just like you did the original video. It is often said that Mount Massive Asylum was modeled after Buffalo State Hospital, and while this may be true for a couple of locations in the map, it does not mean that the entirety of Mount Massive Asylum copied the former Buffalo State Hospital. The two buildings are still vastly different, and although Buffalo State Hospital indeed served as the inspiration for Mount Massive Asylum, there are only a few things they actually share in common, with the most obvious one being their central administrative centers, which on Mount Massive Asylum would be the administration block and the administration building over at Buffalo State Hospital. Even then, there are still many differences between the two, from aspects such as the way rooms are arranged, to the placements of most windows and doors, to the interior decoration. Even the iconic towers are not the exact same and have some slight differences. Outside of the general arrangement of very few walls, doors, and windows, Mount Massive Asylum has little in common with Buffalo State Hospital in this respect. But there is actually another area of Mount Massive Asylum that likely took some inspiration from Buffalo State Hospital, and this is a section in the recreation area across from the hospital, which resembles one of the ward buildings of Buffalo State Hospital. The ward building it bears a resemblance to specifically is Male Ward B, particularly how it appeared after the 1940s and 1950s, when the porches, or verandas, that had been first added to the male wards in the 1910s were completely closed off with chain link fencing. Now, it is not exactly known what purpose this building has at Mount Massive Asylum. However, whatever it is a part of the female ward, and so it is not a freestanding structure like at Buffalo State Hospital. Much like we see with the administration block, the window placements on this structure are also different, especially on the left-hand side, where a couple of windows are angled, since there is a staircase that runs behind them at Buffalo State Hospital. And because there were verandas added, the patients would need a way to access these, and as a result, doors were added. However, doors are not present to access these porches at Mount Massive Asylum, although interestingly enough, there are doors on one of the porches in the nearby hospital. Besides these two areas, the administration block and the recreation area side of the female ward, Mount Massive Asylum bears no other resemblance to Buffalo State Hospital. Buffalo State Hospital follows what is known as the Kirkbride Plan, and used to consist of 10 independent ward buildings, joined by curved connectors to each other, and to the central administration building, while at Mount Massive Asylum, there are 7 main buildings, which are not linked by curved connectors, but rather long linear corridors. In plan, the wings of Buffalo State Hospital step back, forming a V shape, while at Mount Massive Asylum, the way the buildings are arranged cause certain portions of the site to be closed off, which ends up forming a large central courtyard in the middle. At Buffalo State Hospital, the 5 wards to the east of the administration building were for male patients, and the 5 wards on the west were for female patients. And at Mount Massive Asylum, this was reversed, so the single ward building for male patients is to the west of the administration block, and the female ward is to the east. Also at Buffalo State Hospital, each of the 2 buildings on either side of the center were 3 stories tall, the next 2 on either side were 2 stories tall, and the last buildings on each end were single story, while again at Mount Massive Asylum, there is only a single ward building for each gender that is 3 stories tall. The most severely afflicted patients at Buffalo State Hospital were housed in the wards furthest from the main building, which is really the closest thing it had to Mount Massive Asylum's prison block. With Buffalo State Hospital, the administration building and 2 wings directly flanking each side were constructed of Medina sandstone, while the 3 outermost wings on each side were constructed of red brick, while at Mount Massive Asylum, the administration building, male ward, female ward, prison block, and hospital are constructed of sandstone, and the vocational blocks are constructed of brick. Lastly, at Buffalo State Hospital, each wing had a separate kitchen building, which was connected to the main building by a curved connector, which does not exist at Mount Massive Asylum, and the kitchens were instead built into the main buildings. I will note for the record that the male kitchen at Buffalo State Hospital was a single-story stone building, while the female kitchen was a 2-story brick building. Outside of these main buildings, Mount Massive Asylum only features a few small sheds and outbuildings, such as the maintenance sheds in the courtyard and the water tower in the drying ground. Buffalo State Hospital, meanwhile, featured literally dozens and dozens of sheds and outbuildings throughout its 94 years of operation, and in its more than 150 years of existence. Most of the site of the Richardson Olmsted Campus was built up, torn down, and built up again and again because, as patient needs changed, the institution added buildings and then later demolished some. As a result, many of the original buildings of the Buffalo Psychiatric Center are now lost. Now, there actually is some evidence of buildings that may have once stood on a site of Mount Massive Asylum that no longer existed by the time the events of both games take place in 2013, and this can be found in a few documents in Outlast and Outlast Whistleblower. In Outlast, the document MK Ultra CIA Hypnotic Homicide, located in the basement of the administration block, refers to a Building 13 of the Mount Massive Preserve, and then later in the document You Promised Me a Rose Garden, seen in a dorm on the 3rd floor of the female ward, mentions a Mount Massive hospital. Finally, in Outlast Whistleblower, a Mount Massive mental hospital is brought up in the document God and Family, which can be picked up in the crematorium in the hospital. Now, the way I see it, there are 2 possible scenarios here. Either these complexes existed on the very same site that Mount Massive Asylum stands on, but that the buildings that form the complex were later demolished sometime prior to the events of Outlast, or that these buildings were later renovated or expanded into the current Mount Massive Asylum. One of the mysteries surrounding Mount Massive Asylum is there seems to be no official date for when it was established. The closest bit of information I've seen is in the Outlast Switch trailer, in which right after it reveals that Mount Massive Asylum had ceased operations in 1968, there is a newspaper shown right afterwards, and in the bottom right corner, in what is the final sentence of the 2nd paragraph, it reads, "Since its inauguration nearly a century ago, the hospital has been shadowed with rumors of experimental before being cut off. Since this newspaper was issued on Thursday, the 2nd of July, 1977, and if it is indeed correct, this puts Mount Massive Asylum as being established sometime in the late 19th century, perhaps even the exact date that Buffalo State Asylum for the Insane opened its doors on the 15th of November, 1880. However, this cannot be confirmed and remains as just speculation on my end. So this brings us to the outro of the video, which means that's going to be a wrap for this video. So just to kind of sum up, Red Barrels was only inspired by the architecture of Buffalo State Hospital. They did not model all that much from it for Mount Massive Asylum. Now, one location that I did not bring up in this video that also served as inspiration for an area within Outlast is the Snow Lab, located in Ontario, Canada, which served as inspiration for the Underground Lab. However, I feel that it honestly deserves its own video, and so that is something that will be covered in the hopefully not so distant future. Until then, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in the next one as always. So until then, goodbye for now, everyone.